In our off-season look, we're going to take a look at the New York Islanders, who, of course, failed to reach the Stanley Cup Finals, but they made it to the third round, which is the first time they've made it that far since 1993. Now, if you're a big fan of the draft and you're an Islanders fan, I have some bad news for you. October 6th, I got nothing for you. They won't have a first-round draft pick or a second because Ottawa has those, and they don't pick until 90th overall. That's their own third-round pick. And so it's going to be a quiet draft for the Islanders in general. But it is not going to be a quiet offseason. Oh, no. Lou Lamoriello, who is the GM of the year, and everybody talks about how fantastic he is, and rightfully so. I'm not going to argue that he isn't. He has a lot of work. A lot of work if he's going to back up that GM of the year title. And Barry Trotz, excellent job for Barry Trotz as coach. And honestly, he has the Islanders playing a style of hockey that it may not always be pretty, but it wins. And that's the key thing with the Islanders and their fans. They aren't as worried about things being all pretty and all the flash and dash. Are you winning? If the answer is no, then change that. Get to winning. Islander fans having enough of the mediocrity that they've dealt with since basically the mid-'80s, really. Once that dynasty ended, things turned mediocre pretty quickly. And so they need to change that narrative, and it feels like this is the team that may finally do it. But they have some major challenges in the offseason. They have $8.91 million in cap space. And that is as deceptive as any cap space in the National Hockey League. So we'll discuss why in a second here, but when you look at their top six, this is an excellent top six. Lee, Barzal, Eberle, Beauvillier, Nelson, and Bailey. And I like Beauvillier's scoring touch. I think Brock Nelson in these playoffs had the scoring touch that in the last playoffs, he was snake bit last playoffs. And Bailey emerged as one of the best passers in the game during these playoffs. Now, whether or not that carries over to next season, we'll see, but some elite passing level stats put up by him during the postseason, and he just looked great out there. Barzal, Eberle, Lee. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Eberle. Eberle might be a guy that Lou Lamoriello has to move out. It's possible because he needs cap space. Now, Pajot may very well end up in a top six role potentially next year, depending on what they do with their other players. Ideally, he's their third line center, but he can play anywhere. And he showed in the playoffs why he's worth the money that Lou Lamoriello gave him and why he's worth giving up draft picks to get. Wahlstrom, I still believe that Wahlstrom could be an NHLer. I know he had a rough year. Overall, not a great year by his standards. Absolutely, he'd agree with that. And so I still think there's that potential there. And Kiefer Bellows. Kiefer Bellows came in, showed a bit of a scoring touch. It's possible that Kiefer Bellows gets into that conversation as well. Andrew Ladd, his contract is the issue. If Lou Lamoriello can find a way to get rid of Andrew Ladd's contract, he might look like a genius later. Would he like the Louis Eriksson contract in return? So Ladd, $5.5 million a year until 2023. That's a lot of money for a guy who doesn't project as being a top six forward at this stage, a guy who's regularly injured and was a healthy scratch as well during postseason games. So Ladd is that guy that I think probably gets bought out, even though with 3 years left, that'd be 6 years you're paying for that buyout. But they're going to have to make some changes in the New York Islanders lineup in order to accommodate the restricted free agents they have. Their blue line, Taves, Pollock, and Leddy. Pollock and Pollock play together in part to drive announcers insane, and the other part because they're excellent together. They complement each other really, really well. I think if you had a defensive duos award, and you could have like best line of the year award as well, which I think would be fun, but the NHL doesn't do that. But yeah, Pollock and Pollock, they complement each other so well that when Pollock's out of the lineup, you can tell. It hurts Pollock's game. It hurts the Islanders' defense in general. And so that's your top four. It is possible that Dobson ends up getting more of a chance next year than he got this year. Barry Trotz will get him in the lineup. He just, he's a rookie. You let him watch a lot. And Dobson, in his limited appearance I think he just had the one game, right, in the postseason. He looked good. He did, and as the game went along, he got more ice time. So I think if they decide to make a move on the blue line, and I'm looking at Johnny Boychuk here and his $6 million price tag until 2022, and so between Boychuk and Ladd, that's $11.5 million on that team that is probably going to need to be moved out so they have a comfortable amount of cap space for the free agents that they're dealing with. And in net, of course, Varlamov and Sorokin. Sorokin will be the backup next year, or maybe he steals the job. Ilya Sorokin, by all measures, is going to be another one of these excellent young Russian goaltenders. And of course, Askarov's getting drafted in the first round this year. All of a sudden, we're getting a lot of really good goaltenders out of Europe. This is cyclical. I'm old enough to remember when they were all coming out of Quebec, when every goaltender had grown up watching Patrick Roy, and they all wanted to be Patrick Roy, so they were all out of Quebec. Now they seem to be a lot of guys out of Europe. So we'll see how things go for Sorokin, and of course it'll be interesting to see him against Samsonov and against Shesterkin and see which one of those three ends up being the best of the European goaltenders. Now, in that $8.9 million cap space, their UFAs who would exit, Brassard's probably gone. Brassard's probably done. Martin, it depends. It depends how much money Martin wants. I think Lou Lamoriello likes Matt Martin, so if he wants to keep him, and if it's a mutually, if they're mutually interested parties, I think they find a way to make it work. Andy Green was a good rental, but I think he was just a rental, so I would think Green's probably gone. And Thomas Grice. Grice, of course, had a pretty good year last year as well, and is going to be looking to parlay that into some money this summer. I don't know how much money is going to be there for him. Well, this fall. It's already autumn, so you know what I mean. When we hit UFA status for him, we'll see how much he gets. I would think a 2-year contract. I don't know on the exact dollars. I would think if just down the street here in Vancouver, if Markstrom goes, I could see Grice being a guy that Benning might throw money at for a couple of years to pad out the time that's going to be needed for Demko to really become that number one guy, and then maybe DiPietro's ready to be the backup at the time that Grice's contract comes to an end. And the RFAs, and this is where things get interesting. Josh Hosang. Remember Hosang? He's still a thing. And he's a restricted free agent this summer. And I would think if you offered him $50 and he took it, that the Islanders would go, yeah, it's fine. The Islanders have tried to trade Hosang. There hasn't been any takers. I would expect his name to be out there during the offseason, like here, for instance. And I don't know that that's necessarily going to change, but the relationship between the Islanders and Josh Hosang is not non-existent. It's just non-existent. It's not there. So there are those who still believe that Hosang will become a top player in the NHL, like a top 6 or a top 9. Kudos to them. I don't necessarily see it, but we'll see what happens. So Hosang is out there as an RFA, and again, I don't think it would take a large offer sheet for the Islanders to say, we won't match, he can go there. And it may not even be an offer that qualifies as one that you'd have to give up a pick to get. I'll go through the whole RFA thing when we get closer to October 9th. But basically, you can offer somebody money, they accept it, and there are situations where a team will say, forget it, and they don't get anything back for losing a restricted free agent. Ryan Pollock and Matthew Barzal. Those guys are both going to make significant increases on the money they were making this past season. Pollock himself, I would think, $5 million? You've got to think, probably. I mean, Myers gets 6 in Vancouver, so you've got to think Pollock at least 5. And that's as a restricted free agent. And then Barzal, that's where your offer sheet could potentially happen. The Islanders only have $8.91 million in cap space. You can absolutely throw an offer sheet at Barzal and then work out a deal with the Islanders. You could throw an offer sheet at Barzal that they match and then say, well, now you're over the cap. Can we make a trade for Eberle? Now you're over the cap. Can we have a discussion about Anthony Beauvillier and how much you think he's worth? So it's going to be an interesting offseason. I don't know that we're necessarily going to see offer sheets because there aren't a lot of teams that are in a position where they can throw money at a Barzal like that, but it's possible. It's one of those intriguing off-season items to watch. So, will he get offer sheeted? Will he not? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And the last question I will finish this off with is it sustainable? Can the New York Islanders, under Lamoriello and Trotz, get them back here again? Are they going to be that legitimate contender for a long time? Or was this a Cinderella run that's going to raise the bar so much that they could suffer through like an Ottawa level issue where it's built on sand, or it's just built, it's one of those one-time things that they can't replicate. I know there'll be some on one side of the coin and some on the other. For me personally, I do think it's sustainable because you've got Trotz, you've got Lamoriello, and you've got a pretty decent team. It's going to depend on what happens with the RFAs and how you manage to stand to the cap. Who you buy out, who you're able to move, all this other wonderful stuff. It's going to be fascinating to watch, so let me know what you think, and I will talk to you again soon.